Good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Before we call the roll this morning, I'd like to welcome some new members to our board. With us this morning are San Diego City Council member Henry Foster. It's great to have you with us, as well as Chula Vista Council member Cesar Fernandez is with us as well. Welcome. And Coronado Council member Carrie Downey. Thank you very much for being with us. It's great to have the three of you on board, and we look forward to your participation. With that, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please indicate your presence on the tablets. I'm missing two. I'm missing two more selections. Chair, we have a quorum with 12 members present.
Thank you, clerk. Let's begin with non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anyone who'd like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do. Peter Sishi, please make your way to the podium.
Good morning. My name is Peter Zishi. I serve on the Taxi Advisory Committee representing the United Taxi Workers of San Diego. And just a couple comments. One is that the TAC has done very well this year under the leadership of Sean Elo Rivera, City Councilman. We've got a lot of work done. A lot of Sharon said before, there's a lot of good dialogue from taxi drivers. And I want to say that unlike some years way in the past, there's been a lot of respect shown on both sides to let the taxi drivers come forward and talk about their issues. We've done some good stuff. We wanted to thank the MTS for backing us up on trying to help at the border with some illegal, I'll call them taxi rides, but they're not taxi rides, ridership, shall we say. One issue coming up I want to alert you on, it is a sort of a bad look. We went over the budget, and MTS had, for the taxi industry, showed a reserve of over about $1 million when the operating costs are about $700,000 a year. And there was a good discussion by Lenny Fuel about why that happened. But for the taxi drivers, having a reserve that's more than 100% of your operating costs, for whatever reason, is not a good look. A lot of misunderstanding there. So one of the things we're going to offer to do in the new year is have an ad hoc committee. Talk to Lenny about it, and he's going to move on it. Have an ad hoc committee where we could review the budget and sort of try and get an idea, more a rational approach to what should be the size of the reserves, so that when we're looking at the budget and the people whose money went into those reserves are looking at it, it seems reasonable to them. So we look forward to that in the new year, and I wish you all happy holidays. Thank you.
Next is Alex Wong. Alex, please unmute yourself now.
Rail to the airport is a great project, but the airport's trolley concept that MTS is helping Sandac develop is deeply, deeply flawed. It would merge onto existing green and blue line tracks, creating a bottleneck that would constrain capacity on the airport blue and green lines to 10 minutes each. This is bad. Mission Valley and Grantsville are growing gangbusters. What if Green Line's ridership skyrockets, and even with 4-car trolleys rounding every 10 minutes on a Green Line, capacity is overwhelmed? University City will add up to 72,000 new jobs and over 50,000 new residents. What if Mid-Coast ridership skyrockets, and even with 4-car trolleys at 10-minute frequencies cannot keep up with demand? What if ridership on the airport trolley, Green Line, and Midcoast all shatter expectations, and even with 4-car trolleys running every 10 minutes on each line, passengers are packed like sardines? This is a very likely scenario, because trolley ridership, especially on the Midcoast, is already skyrocketing. The bottleneck will also slow down and delay trolleys. Today, blue and green line trains pass under Hawthorne Street at full speed. but the airport trolley is proposed to merge onto the blue and green lines at Hawthorne. This will create a junction resembling a freeway stop where blue and green line trolleys will have to slow down and stop for airport trolleys to cross the junction and vice versa. And between Hawthorne and Santa Fe Depot, where the airport trolley would share tracks with the blue and green lines, delays on the airport trolley will also delay the blue and green lines and vice versa. This will just lead to a domino chain of delays throughout the entire trolley system. Therefore, the airport trolley concept must be revised such that the airport trolley is operationally separate from existing trolley lines. This would maximize capacity and reliability on both the airport trolley and the Midcoast and Green lines. The only physical connections between the airport trolley and the Green line should be non-revenue tracks used only to move airport trolleys to and from the trolley yard, but never in revenue service. Thank you.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's move on to our consent items, which are items 3 through 20. Clerk, is there any public comment on the consent items?
We do not.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent items? We have a motion from Member Hall. We have a second from Member McCann. Any discussion on the consent items? Seeing no discussion, Clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. The motion passes unanimously with 3 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. That brings us to item 21, which is a report on Senate Bill 434. This is an informational item, and we're going to invite Stacy Bishop to kick off the presentation.
Good morning, board members. Stacy Bishop, Manager of Marketing and Communications. We are joined remotely by Chris Tatham, the CEO of ETC Institute, and we'll be presenting today on some recent safety survey findings. This was as a result of a directive from California State Senate Bill 434 to survey transit riders' experience of harassment on board public transit to better understand their experiences and how that may impact their use of transit. And so we completed that initial survey this fall, and so ETC was our consultant, and so I will turn it over to Chris to discuss the initial findings.
Great, thanks, Stacy. It's a pleasure to be with you today. What I'm going to do is just briefly walk you through the background. I think most of you are familiar with Senate Bill 434, but some of you may not. I'll walk you through the methodology, just how we did the survey. And then I picked out 10 findings that I thought were both interesting and relevant for future decision making. And then ultimately, I'll share some of the suggested improvements that we received from riders, both from the survey and the focus groups that we did. So I'll kind of start off with the background. Senate Bill 434, it actually originated after a Bay Area study back in 2019 that found that harassment was causing people, particularly women, to choose not to use public transit services. So Senator Min actually led the effort, and it was ultimately signed into law in 2023. And the idea was to have a data-driven approach to really understand how significant the issues were, what they were about, and whether or not that they were having impacts on ridership. It involved a requirement for the 10 largest transit operators in California to essentially do a survey. There were guidelines that were given, and that data had to be completed and published by the end of this month. And ETC Institute works with many of the transit operators. We actually conducted the same survey or similar survey for Orange County Transit Authority, LA Metro, Long Beach Transit, in addition to MTS. What's different about this survey is it really focused on how riders feel when they're using transit services with regard to interactions with other people who are either at stops or buses. It's not a safety survey in sense to regard the operations or traffic accidents and such. So that's really how things got started. As far as the survey methodology, it was conducted in October. We designed the sample to make sure that all bus and trolley lines were represented. We administered it to a little over 500 riders in both English and Spanish. And the results aren't perfect, but giving the error of about 4.5%, we feel very good about the data. Basically, when you see something that says plus or minus 4.35% at the 95% level of confidence, it technically means that if we did the survey 100 times, we'd get the same results within about 4.5% or less. So very representative sample. In addition, in November, we conducted focus groups with some key groups just to make sure they were well represented. This included groups with people of color, some folks who were females. We had people who had disabilities, members of the LGBTQIA plus group, and then also people who spoke Spanish as their primary language. So with that, let me get into some of the findings. I think one of the first biggest things is how safe do people feel when riding the bus and the trolley system. And we found that most riders do report feeling safe. 81% said they were safe, 19 did not. Interestingly, for this survey, trolley perceptions of safety were a little higher than the bus. We also just recently completed a customer survey for you, and bus was a little bit higher than trolley. So they're really within the margin of error. And trolley at one time had some significantly lower ratings than bus. So you've really closed the gap. So that was one of the encouraging findings. We also found there weren't a lot of people who felt extremely unsafe. There are about 4% who reported that compared to 25% or more than 5 times reported that they felt extremely safe. As far as the next chart shows the perceptions of how safety has changed just compared to a year ago. One of their encouraging findings from the survey was we asked people how they felt that their level of safety had changed while riding MTS compared to 1 year ago. And riders were 3.5 times more likely to report that they felt more safe riding MTS than they were to say that they felt less safe. You can see that with the 28% feeling more safe, 8% less safe. About half felt about the same. It also showed that the efforts to raise awareness and work with folks in the trolley appear to have a positive effect on perceptions of safety on the trolley as well. Third thing that we found is just really how the results for MTS compare to other operators in Southern California. I'd love to be able to give you head-to-head comparisons, but every agency ended up wanting to kind of do their survey a little differently, so the questions aren't exactly the same, which is why if you look at the bottom, you'll see extremely safe, strongly agree. The questions are asked a little bit differently, but I find that it's good sometimes just to reflect on the positives and negatives. And you'll see overall MTS's rating of 81%, which is the blue, is pretty consistent, a little higher than we saw with OCTA, a little bit below Long Beach, but significantly higher than LA Metro. But all in all, MTS seems to compare fairly favorably with the other transit operators in Southern California. The fourth thing that we found is just how many riders have actually seen or experienced harassment. So we asked 2 questions. One actually was, have you experienced it? The other was, or it was directed to you. The other was just, have you seen it? And altogether, about 2 out of 3 riders had either seen it or had experienced it themselves. So it is something that's fairly common, but when we explored the kinds of things that were reported, which is our next finding, we actually asked people what they saw. And most of the time, the types of harassment were not typically severe. They tended to be related to comments that people said, whether they're hostile, sexual comments. Sometimes people felt that someone was stalking them. But if you look at this chart on the right, you can see the percentage of riders on the bus versus percentage of on the trolley who reported experiencing or seeing various types of harassment. And so that's what we saw most of the time, which is one of the reasons we feel that the percentage of people who reported feeling very unsafe was relatively low. The next chart gives you our 6th finding, is kind of where and when do people see harassment occurring. And first thing, we saw it kind of happening all day long. You'll see that 55% of incidents were reported happening between the evening hours or the afternoon hours from 3 to 6 p.m. 42% of people reported them happening sometime in the early morning to midday. 40% reported something in the evening between 7 p.m. or later. It was lowest, but also ridership was lowest before 7 a.m. or 14%. But there were things all day. When we asked people whether they were on board or on stations or stops when they experienced it or saw the incidents, you see 3 out of 4 of the people who saw or experienced something said it was on board. 44% indicated they saw it at a station or a stop. What we found, though, is when we gave respondents different types of things that might be causing, whether it was racial, gender related, and so forth, Most people, or at least the most frequent response was this: it just seemed random. There didn't seem to be a particular reason for it. However, the second most frequently selected item indicated that it was related to gender or gender expression. So those are the two things that people most frequently indicated was the cause or the motivation behind the incident. When we look at the next slide on finding 7, we were taking a look at how it impacts people's feelings of safety. So we pulled the data. You can see the overall result is on the top. That's the 81% overall who felt safe, 19% did not feel safe. But we did find that experiencing or seeing harassment did make some difference, particularly in the percent of people who reported feeling very extremely safe. You'll see of those who had seen or experienced harassment, only 13% reported being safe. But overall, even if they had experienced something, 75% still felt at least somewhat safe. On the other hand, those who hadn't seen or experienced harassment, nearly half indicated that they felt extremely safe on MTS. And you can see another 45% said they were somewhat safe. So the combined total was 91%. On the other side of this, though, and why I mentioned that most of the types of incidents were less severe, you can see even the people who hadn't experienced any harassment, still 3% of them felt extremely unsafe when riding MTS. And so this suggests that there could also be other factors that are contributing to people who are feeling unsafe, particularly the ones who feel extremely unsafe, that aren't necessarily related to seeing or being harassed while riding. This takes us to our 8th finding, just whether or not people are reporting these incidents. We found that it was actually pretty low. 78% of the respondents who saw or experienced incidents said they did not report them. That was typical of what we've seen in other agencies for whom we've done the survey. So that wasn't real surprising. And the biggest reason people said that they didn't report it was they didn't think it was serious enough to report. Another reason people didn't report is they just didn't know how or who to contact. And that was 40% of those who had seen or experienced, frankly, just said they didn't know what to do. So there may be some opportunities to raise awareness in that area. Our 9th finding, which is on the next slide, is how it has caused changes in rider behavior. For those who had seen or experienced harassment, almost half said they haven't taken any new precautions or changed their behavior at all since experiencing it while using MTS. 26% said they didn't ride at night. 20% said they pick a seat or in a direction to face specifically. 15% said they avoid certain routes or stops. And then 9% of folks indicated they don't ride alone. The last thing I'll share with you before I get into some of the other things that we learned from the focus groups and next steps is just what differences are between demographics. And we didn't find a lot of differences. We expected to, but you'll see for all respondents, 81% felt safe. You'll see for female respondents, it was a little lower than male respondents. Members of LGBTQIA+ were a little bit less, but you can even see Black and African Americans were a lower group, but when they actually delved into the data, they actually had a higher percentage of female respondents, which is likely more contributing to that. Male African Americans were almost feeling just as safe as the average respondent overall to the survey. So although there were some differences, it wasn't as significant as we had anticipated going into the survey. I'd next like to just talk a little bit about our focus groups. The 5 focus groups were conducted in November. And as I mentioned, we recruited them from previous surveys. ETC Institute conducted an origin and destination survey for SANDAG, which involves surveys of MTS riders last year. And so we recruited people who had indicated they participate in future surveys from that survey, along with the safety survey that we just conducted. And we had 5 groups, as I mentioned before. You can see the number of participants in each of those groups included people of color. We had 10. Female community, we had 11 participants. The one with riders with disabilities had 8. The one with LGBTQI+ community had 10. And then our Spanish primary language group also had 10. So all of that information helped us kind of look at the survey to identify some possible suggestions for improvement. And these are some of the ideas. They're not binding or compelling, but some of the things that we heard were things like increasing security, particularly having presence at stops and when there's less light out, early morning, late at night at high volume hubs. Improving awareness for just things like a security hotline and possibly even integrating it into the Pronto app. We also heard that considering implementing things like more frequent night routes to reduce overcrowding. Sometimes that causes people to feel less safe in the evenings. Surveillance systems, whether it's cameras and things like that on buses and trolleys. Heard ideas about having a neighborhood watch type program, and people aren't looking at some sort of enforcement tool. This really more just referred to people having systems in place where if people see something, they know how to report it, so that people can be looking out for other people and perhaps increase the percentage of people who may report incidents when they occur. And then the last one was just strengthening enforcement policies for fare evasion and disruptive behavior. We saw a lot of comments, got a lot of feedback about sometimes people just getting on the bus without paying leads to incidents and not having good ways to respond to that. So last slide I'll share with you is just really the overall conclusions that we took away as the firm doing the survey. First, I think you can feel good that most riders feel safe when using MTS. Very few feel very unsafe. And actually the people who never have seen an incident or experienced an incident are just as likely to feel very unsafe as people who have. In addition, MTS appears to be moving in the right direction with 3.5 times more people feeling that it's gotten safe over the past year compared to those who think it's gotten less safe. The gap with trolley riders that once exists seems to be being closed. So even though they were more likely to have seen and experienced harassment than bus riders, the percentage who felt safe actually was slightly higher on this survey, though it continues to lag on our customer survey. It's definitely moving in the right direction. In addition, we found that those who have seen or experienced generally feel less safe than those who haven't. And so there are reasons to try to make sure that harassment isn't taking place. We saw 91% of the people who had not seen or experienced something indicated that they felt safe or somewhat safe. And though there are some groups that were generally less likely to feel safe, it was not as significant as we anticipated. And we hope that the opportunities that exist to raise awareness may lead to some more reporting, and that could ultimately help reduce the number of incidents that happen in the future. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy and let her close out the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. So as far as next steps, we have some practical steps that we have to finalize the study report and post the data in accordance with the bill guidelines. So we'll be doing that. We definitely want to review the comprehensive agency report when that's made available by the state. And there's already been some communication to confer with other agencies about their findings and outcomes and how other transit agencies are looking at this and looking to address. Obviously, some of the suggestions that came out of the focus groups are things that are already in process. We are close to hitting that increased security goal that was approved by the board about a year ago. There will be some fare enforcement changes happening in the new year. And really so another takeaway is the education and awareness of the security hotline. We've asked as one of the follow-ups ETC to look into if there's a difference in awareness on the trolley and bus, because over this last year we did do significantly more awareness efforts on the trolley than the bus. So trying to see if there's a difference in awareness that may be attributed to that we could look to replicate on the bus. We do have the security information in the app, but how can we make that more prominent? So looking at that, and then there are possible opportunities for further research depending on next steps that we want to take. There are some limitations from this just because of the sample size. However, our customer satisfaction survey that was referenced that we will be presenting on in a couple of months is a much larger sample size. And so we can look at, do some of these safety trends hold true by line, by population? Do we want to do additional focus groups with communities that appear to feel less safe, or communities that maybe we didn't get to include and speak specifically to in this effort? So with that, we will open it up for questions and comments.
Thank you for the presentation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right, we will begin our board discussion with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you thank you both for a great presentation. A lot of data, a lot of good real world information. This is kind of half of the picture. The other half, this is the perception picture. How do I feel? How do I interpret? The other half would be the practice side or the data side of, so what kind of changes have happened since we do that? I think something that would be helpful to the board in the future would be an analysis of incidents over the past year since we've added more code compliance officers. While they're not safety officers per se, their presence certainly conveys a sense of security or well-being. It would be interesting to know the amount of incidents before we started this hiring trend, and I know we're not done, compared to where we're at today with the number of incidents. And that would give us a sense of this is how people feel and this is how things have changed, and we could compare the two. I think that would be a helpful analysis to do.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think kind of always looking at it with additional context of some of the changes that the board has made and how those have played themselves out, on the line. We've been very balanced and monitored this and have been flexible where needed. And so I do appreciate this report and am thinking about it as parallel to a lot of the changes that we have made. And it kind of shows me that, we can, while being flexible, kind of continue on that same philosophical path of making sure that the line is, we have enforcement, that there's structure, and that we're also not essentially ruining people's lives through that type of enforcement. And so I think we've tried to strike that, and it's some of that comes out in the report. I wanted to ask about the changes that we did, that Stacey, you did mention that we had approved with additional security in the amount of about $4.2 million the end of last year, and the goals that we had with that, which were to increase the security officers on the trolley to about 8 to 10 teams per shift. We were working at 5 to 6 teams per shift. We also wanted to boost homeless outreach to 7 days a week. So where are we I know we're still going through hiring and everything. Where are we with those goals that we set out last year?
I can ask Tim Curran to come on up and he can talk to you about where we are with that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great question. Last year, you approved about a 60% increase in our code compliance
Tim,
inspectors.
can you give your title?
Oh, I'm sorry. Tim Kern, I'm the Director of Transit Security and Passenger Safety. Last year, and this board approved about a 60% increase in our code compliance inspector. That equaled about 34 positions. We hired over 35 in the last 12 months. Through attrition, we lost a few people here, but we are up over we're about 83 code compliance inspectors for an intended goal of 95. We have 10 more starting on January 6th. So we're very happy about that. We have been able to increase our train teams, which is 2 CCIs, to about 8 per shift right now, with the goal of getting closer to 10. And the other factor is there is a significant presence increase on the system. And we're seeing it in the comments in our customer relations reports that we get a lot of praise for that. We get obviously some complaints here and there, but people are noticing the increased presence.
Okay, thank you for that. And what about homeless outreach? That has always been a part of our conversation. It was a part of the approval of additional funding. Where are we with that?
We're doing great with that. We actually doubled our homeless outreach efforts last year. This time last year, we had 1 CCI doing homeless outreach. Today, we have 2. The number of events that they attend have just gone through the roof. Went to Lemon Grove. I think you saw our team out there,
I was-
Supervisor.
Yes, you're ahead of me. I was going to say thank you for bringing folks out. It was a very successful event.
We're
Yes.
working with probably well over a dozen groups from Imperial Beach all the way to San Diego. On a daily basis, we work with the County of San Diego's outreach efforts, as well as the city. We've really increased it quite a bit. We work with the VA on a regular basis. We do events with them probably at least once a month at various stations throughout our service areas. So I can honestly say it's doubled in the last year.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just my last question on that particular effort. So as I'm understanding it and hearing what you're saying, is that we're more in a collaborative space and an outreach kind of events and things, but not necessarily on the line, on the transit line, doing our outreach ourselves. So we certainly wouldn't be able to do that with two folks, right? So is that kind of the philosophy behind how we're doing outreach as MTS?
Well, most of our efforts are on the line, but yes, we do get off, into the neighborhoods as well, if that's what you're asking. Yes, ma'am.
I guess I'm asking if we have two folks that are dedicated to homeless outreach, then either our CCIs are doing that work in conjunction with the folks that are doing the outreach, because it sounds like the outreach is more, which is needed, but it's more the events that folks are having and sponsoring and making sure that people know their resources, right? And being at
Yeah.
those events.
Tim, maybe you need to talk about what the other CCIs, are they gaining training? Are they
Oh,
handing
absolutely.
things out?
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that?
Absolutely. During their initial training, all of our code compliance inspectors get outreach training on that. Most of them carry outreach information, info sheets, how they can get help, and they're very quick to address it and call in our outreach experts to come over and meet them to provide those. You probably read our weekly safety and security reports. You can see from that, we might contact 40, 50 clients, if you will, on a particular week, our outreach guys, and they're 19, 20 of them, a lot more than before, are actually accepting resource help. So we are seeing that, but everybody out in the line gets that training and is carrying the materials to offer that to people.
Okay, thank you. And I know there's on the resource side, we have a lot of work to do to get people what they need outside of MTS. So I understand we've discussed that before too. So thank you very much. Those are all my questions and comments.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. We'll go to Member Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation here. I just one a request for additional context for the data that we have here, which would be what the responses look like in other jurisdictions. So I think that's helpful to the extent that we can take a look at that. Sharon, I think that'd be helpful because we can compare and contrast the way what's happening in San Diego is comparing to statewide trends. I don't know how much we can read into that, but it does feel like useful contextual information as we're trying to figure out what we're doing that's working, and we might be able to measure that against other folks who are and aren't taking similar steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Elo Rivera. Member Moreno.
First and foremost, thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering, what was the cost of the survey? How much does it cost us to conduct this survey?
I don't know if procurement, it was just under 150,000. I want to say it was around 130-ish. All the work that we've done is reimbursable by the state. So that was part of it, is in order to receive state funding, any work that has been completed this year, the state is actually paying for. So at this time, there's no out-of-pocket costs for MTS. Should we continue to do additional research or follow-ups in the new year, that would incur cost to MTS.
Wonderful. And how often does the state mandate that we conduct this survey?
To my understanding, there is no requirements currently to do updates. This was the first time that it was implemented, so it's to be determined if they will make that change.
Okay. And are we proposing to continue these surveys or?
Well, we do a comprehensive customer satisfaction survey, and so we would dovetail that probably some of this type of questioning into those surveys.
Okay, thank you. What percentage of our riders are women?
We will have an update on that in the new year. Our customer satisfaction findings are actually supposed to be available
Okay.
in January.
But the latest number that you have offhand?
I don't know if anybody from planning is here. The onboard survey is really the best way to do that, and Sandag is currently conducting that for us. I think the last time they conducted it was like 6 years ago, so none of that would really be all that relevant at this point.
I got you.
But I mean, you've got to figure, Brent, would you have a like ballpark? Is it 40%? Please give your title.
Hi, Brent Boyd, Director of Planning and Scheduling. I believe the latest stats, it's a little bit higher women than men. It's about 55%, something like that, but we'll have to confirm. Sharon's right, there is a onboard survey that Sandag conducts every 5 years. We were supposed to get the results. They were supposed to do one in 2020, 2021, but got delayed due to COVID. So they did the survey in the last year, and we'll get the results very soon after the new year. So we'll have an updated number at that point.
So would it be fair to say that a majority of our riders are women?
We'll have to double check the numbers, but I
You
think
said
the
55, so
I think
that's.
the latest numbers are, it's a higher percentage of women than men, but we'll
Okay.
have to double check the numbers.
And I actually just pulled the last customer satisfaction survey results from September of 2022 was the final report. And it actually shows that in 2022, there was 46% female, 53% male, and 1% non-binary.
But that was 2022.
That was
when our
2022 and
ridership
probably
was-
earlier than that as well. So
Yeah.
like this new survey will really give us like much more relevant data.
Well,
And I might comment, we actually did the survey for Sandag. I just don't have the numbers with me. But we could provide that to MTS very soon if you'd like that, to be sure it's exact.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And the questions that I'm asking really were sparked by the item that states that several population of riders reported feeling less safe than others, including women riders. Obviously, I take a big issue with that. And I'm wondering if we should probably look at mechanisms that other transit agencies have utilized to make women feel safe. One of the biggest pushes I've had as a council member, as a board member here, has been our ridership and really building our ridership. I've actually been pretty aggressive in my 6 years focusing on our ridership. We have transitioned into really pushing our youth to ride our transportation system, and that's essentially to build our future riders, future paying riders. I'm thinking of 13-year-old girls, 14-year-old girls, and how safe or unsafe they feel and or their parents might feel. So I definitely want to peel that onion a little bit more. I know that Japan has been really leading the way. Mexico City has been leading the way also in providing transportation specifically for women. I think those are agencies that I look at, and anytime we talk about transportation systems, we look at France and worldwide, and Mexico City as leaders of that. So I think it's high time we look into that. I certainly would love to dive a little deeper. We certainly do not want a large percentage of our population or of our riders to be feeling unsafe. So I just wanted to leave that there, and thank you for the report, and thank you. It's fascinating. Thank you for the information.
Thank you, Member Moreno. Member Downey.
Yes, I'm sorry. I did not see in the report. Can we ask for a future report, the riders, which bus line they're on, which trolley line they're on?
Yes, we do have that data available. So we will double check. I think there is a chart. Some of that data, we wanted to look at safety by line, but again,
Yeah.
because of the number, we are limited in making statistical assumptions from that. But that's one of our takeaways for ETC for the customer satisfaction survey, is to look at safety questions that were asked in that survey by line to see if there's different trends by line. So we'll make sure that the data collected by line for this report is in there, but we will be looking at safety by line as part of the customer satisfaction findings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Downey. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you. Just really quick on Councilmember Moreno's point. A couple years ago, we did have Circulate San Diego come to the Public Security Committee because they have done extensive research on women and ridership. They had quite a few themes that came out of their research, but I do also recall the infrastructure piece around additional lighting, and that was like really important and something that we should continue to think about investing in by way of public safety. But they had a lot of other recommendations. That's one that I truly remember, but I think going internationally is super important too, but we did begin that conversation.
And to follow up on that, I neglected to mention regarding lighting, a few SELT projects did fund lighting. And so the orange line lighting update is underway. It was much more substantial than we initially thought, but that work is underway currently. And then we are actually on track to have the first 33 pilot solar lights that were approved at bus stops. Those should be up in the springtime. And so we expect to be able to update the page with where those locations are in a timeline here in the next few weeks. So we are making some progress on lighting as well.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem. Thank you, Ms. Bishop. Seeing no further discussion on this informational item, let's move to our next item, which is item 22, a report on project labor agreement monitoring. This is also an informational item. We will turn it over to Samantha Leslie to begin this presentation. Once you get settled in, feel free to begin.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Leslie, and I have here Katie Rich from the Solus Group. And this presentation is to discuss the implementation of MTS's Project Labor Agreement, or PLA. As background, in 2021, through MTS Board Policy 66, the board directed staff to negotiate a project labor agreement for its large construction projects, as well as to give an update annually on the implementation of the PLA. In 2023, December, the board approved the negotiated PLA with the San Diego County Building Trades Council. We've had one emergency project so far that's had the PLA implemented, but we'll also discuss the various larger construction projects that are coming online in the next few years that will also have a PLA. And so Katie will provide an update on her monitoring efforts towards the PLA and what's to come in this program. Katie?
Thank you. As mentioned, my name is Katie Rich, and I'm with the Solus Group. I'm a project manager that's overseeing the PLA and pavilions requirements for MTS. I like to say that I fell into the world of the 3 Ps, public works, prevailing wage, and PLAs about 20 years ago after becoming quite disheartened in the marketing field. So it's been a nice surprise that it's something that I actually love. Just a little bit about what a PLA is. It's a pre-hire collective bargaining agreement with one or more labor organizations that establishes the terms and conditions of employment for a specific construction project. So it operates very much like a job site constitution. It establishes worksite conditions, project execution, and protocol to resolve labor disputes without resorting to strikes and lockouts. And as a condition of being awarded a contract, the contractor must sign the negotiated PLA with the relevant unions. As Samantha mentioned, 12/14/2023 was when the MTS board approved the PLA. There was a copy of the fully signed PLA received on 3/21, authorized the execution of the negotiated PLA with the San Diego County Building and Construction Trades was also 12/14/2023. So this agreement covers all on-site preparation, construction, alteration, demo, install, improvement, landscaping, painting, or repair of building structures and other works. On-site work includes work solely done for the covered project, so temporary yards, dedicated sites, or other areas that are adjacent to the project are covered. Any on-site or off-site batch plant constructed solely to supply materials to the covered project. Any startup, collaboration, Commissioning, performance testing, repair, maintenance, or operational revisions to systems or subsystems also fall under the PLA. Not covered work would be work of non-manual employees. So this would be superintendents, supervisors, staff engineers, quality control, mail carriers, security, any professional engineering, administrative, and supervisor roles. The furnishing of supplies, equipment, or materials which are stockpiled for later use are not covered by the PLA. However, I always like to note that delivery of ready mix shall be covered by the terms and conditions of the agreement and also fall under prevailing wage. Sometimes people forget that we have on-off haul happening on these projects. There is a 40% local hire goal. This is of the total construction craft hours on each covered project. A local resident is any individual that resides in the below zip codes or a veteran that resides anywhere. So we are currently implementing the PLA on new construction solicitations that are estimated to exceed $1 million. Not yet implementing new JOC master agreements for any JOC work order that is over $1 million to be solicited with the PLA requirements. This is around June 2025. New solicitations for closed circuit television equipment install services when the individual work order involves work in the furtherance of a construction project estimated again to exceed $1 million. This is to be solicited with PLA requirements around February 2026. New master agreement solicitations for any architectural and engineering that involve an individual task order for geotechnical work, surveying or inspection services for the preparation of a construction project, when again, it's estimated to exceed $1 million. This is to be solicited with the PLA requirements around April 2026. So we're slowly kind of building up additional things that will start to happen as the years pass on. So what does MTS do on these projects? They are responsible for developing independent cost estimates, scopes of work, and posting the construction solicitations. Aim to increase the notice of construction solicitations to ensure sufficient number of competitive bids, which includes posting on Planet Bids, broadcasting notice of the bid to other local public agencies' Planet Bids, notice in newspapers, email blasts to DBE certified firms, we want them on these projects, and also request that they register on MTS's Planet Bid side to review the solicitation. There also is small business outreach. MTS also attends small business outreach events throughout the year to get the word out about MTS's upcoming contracting opportunities. TSG also gets the word out on these projects and attends these types of events. We also have web, where MTS has a dedicated web page with a copy of the PLA and a fact handout for contractors, as well as my contact information. So if there are questions or concerns, they can reach out to me directly and I can help them through the process. So then where do we come in? What does TSG do? I like to say that I'm here to communicate, educate, and facilitate on these projects. This first opportunity happens at a pre-bid meeting. That's where I can introduce myself. I can communicate our role on this, as well as the PLA and prevailing wage requirements. This will continue at the pre-con meeting, where this is another opportunity to meet with the contractors post-award and who will be working on these projects. This also includes facilitating the mandatory pre-job meeting prior to work starting. That is a requirement of the PLA that all contractors need to make sure they attend a pre-job meeting so they can discuss their scopes of work and make sure they're assigned to the correct unions. We also want to make sure that we're facilitating and overseeing any questions that might come up, that they have a document schedule, they know what they need to be doing and who they need to speak with as well. Also, during the project, we're going to be facilitating, collecting, tracking, auditing, and making sure we're collecting all the required forms for prevailing wage and PLA. We'll continue to communicate to MTS. This is in the form of a monthly report that we send out each month, as well as document requests that we send out directly to the prime contractor with a list of any open issues that we need to have resolved. Communication continues with our labor relations, so we are in constant contact with the unions, constant contact with the contractors, as well as MTS staff. We're here to mediate disputes and any grievances that might arise per the PLA, and we will continue this process until compliance has been met and the project has been closed out. I always like to touch on the benefits of a PLA. I think first and foremost, community, job opportunities for residents and local San Diego contractors, especially in the city that they live in and the community that they live in. Unions have a wonderful job referral system that helps to get local residents, skilled craft workers, and apprentices on the project. They also help us with identifying targeted workers. Disadvantaged small businesses, MTS supports the development of programs for the recruitment, training and employment of DBEs and small businesses, and recognizes the ability of local apprenticeship programs to provide meaningful and substantial careers in the building and construction industry. There's actually something in the PLA that gives businesses or DBEs and small businesses the use of 3 core employees versus other contractors have to go 1 every other. So there are things in there specifically to get these small businesses and DBEs on the projects. Also, there's a limit to project disruptions. In recognition of the need to maintain harmony in labor management relations and stability during the term of this PLA, all parties agree to establish effective and binding methods for the settlement of all misunderstandings, disputes, and grievances without any strikes, slowdowns, work interruptions, or disruption of covered work, which does make a difference. So as Samantha mentioned, there has been 1 project so far. The Euclid Grade Crossing and Abutment Project, the work was procured as an emergency contract due to the safety issues. DRS was the prime contractor that was awarded. They had 3 subcontractors on the project. Cat Tracking is a DBE, Laser West Engineering, and Connor Concrete Cutting. This was a quick project. There were about 4 days of work, which I like to keep in mind just because it was a small local hire percentage, but with 4 days of work, that's going to be hard to hit that 40%. It had a huge, quick turnaround. And this was the first MTS construction project that implemented the PLA, so we did have some hiccups. One of them was the forms were not submitted to us in a timely manner. We reached out to the contractor many times. They weren't great about it. Once they did get them to us, we did find some issues. We're in the process right now of getting those resolved. The contractor owned up to it. I think, again, that 4-day turnaround of work just made it less of an important thing on their list versus getting the work done. So we'll continue to have an emphasis to contractors that when these PLA requirements apply, even if it is emergency work, that does not mean they go away. Also making sure MTS staff understands when we're sending out reports, what our emails are saying, what these reports mean, so everyone's on the same page. I also think too, with a small project, we have to be somewhat realistic of if we have 4 or 5 days of work, it's gonna be really hard to hit that 40% local hire goal. I will say with this project, we did still have 55 local worker hours, which is something to be said for 4 or 5 days of work. And we did have 2 local San Diego workers on the project. So it can happen, it will be done. We'll continue to push for local workers. Again, we have much larger projects coming up, so we can hit that 40% much easier than a 3 or 4 day project. So what are these future projects we have coming up? Construction contract has been executed for the American Plaza pedestrian enhancement. There is active procurement on the Imperial Avenue Maintenance Facility, Zero Emissions Bus Overhead Infrastructure, Orange Line Improvement Project, and there are future construction contracts for South Bay Maintenance Facility, Backup Electrical Infrastructure, Traction Power Substation, SBMF Building Demo, and the Downtown Parallel Feeders. And I'd like to note that these $5 to $6 million projects, we certainly can hit the 40. We have a much better chance with the 20 and the 25 million. The more people you have on these projects, the more contractors along with the work, that's how you start reaching those goals because you're having more employees on these projects. So what are we going to do for these future efforts? We want to make sure that we're maximizing this local hiring. Again, there is a mandatory pre-job conference for all bid packages. This is where we once again go over the PLA requirements and the hiring goals. This is also something we talk about at that pre-con meeting. We want to make sure we have targeted contacts with the coordinators, with these contractors to discuss upcoming work and the compliance status. We want to keep making sure we're verifying local hiring efforts made. So we're requesting those forms. We're looking at records of workers interviewed and hired. And again, we're checking all those certified payroll reports coming in to verify things. We want to make sure there's introductions of contractors to resources. So helmets to hard hats, and any pre-apprenticeship programs that are in San Diego, and continue to do outreach. So that's monitoring upcoming candidate referrals from partner agencies, pre-apprenticeship programs. It's talking to the unions, it's talking to the building trades, and making sure everybody's putting in the effort to get these workers on these projects. That being said, thank you for having me, and happy holidays. Questions or comments?
Thank you, Ms. Leslie. Thank you, Ms. Rich. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right. We will now open our board discussion on this informational item, if there is any, and we will begin our conversation with Member Elo Rivera.
I thought the supervisor beat me to the punch. Would you like to go first? No. Okay. I just actually had one question. Can you explain? I think I understand why, but if you can explain, just to make sure I'm not making the wrong assumption about why a shorter project would make it more difficult to meet our local hire goals?
So with some of this work, it's so specialized that a contractor comes in and they already have a set group of people on their payroll and their core worker form that they want to work on these projects, and sometimes the unions cannot provide them the same specialized worker to come out there, so that's an issue. Also, if you have a contractor that has 3 days of work, they're only going to have 1 or 2 of their employees out there, so they may not even have to reach out to the union to get additional local workers. So the less time is the less opportunity for workers to be out there to perform these hours that need to be worked, because it takes a little bit of time to get to 40%.
Is part of that because of most of our unionized workforce is already doing work, or is it?
Depends on the work. So with transit work, there's a set amount of contractors, especially for emergency work, that can come in and do the work that's required. In this case, they had 3 contractors, 2 of them are San Diego, but they only had 2 workers on the project for the entire time since it was only 4 days. If this project was 6 months and they had 2 workers out there every day for 6 months, it's going to bulk up how often they're doing it. So it's the need of how many workers on these projects and how many hours it takes to get the work done.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Elo Rivera. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stott.
So thank you again. I want to just be consistent in, because we discussed this during the executive committee. I just wanted to continue to flag the local workforce, and especially because I completely agree with you around the benefits of a PLA, and one of those is local workforce. And so when we are evaluating the project labor agreements, which have so many benefits, one of the most important ones is the local workforce. And as we go through the kind of framework for PLAs, I will say it is not acceptable in this space to kind of lower the expectation for the lower amounts of what the job cost, when that was a part of the original framework that went along with the 40% goal of the workforce, right? And so I'm going to continue to push for that, because I think it's so beneficial for our families in our region in San Diego to have those benefits and to be on these jobs. So like whatever we need to do, if we need to work with our pre-apprenticeship programs to call out some of this specialized work and have a pipeline, that's fine. Then that's what we need to do. But what I don't want to do is already lower the bar and set an expectation that was not a part of the conversation when we agreed on the framework for how we would roll out these PLAs. Because of the benefits that they bring. That's why I support them. Because members of my community in my supervisorial district can, have those benefits that folks in LA that are coming down have, right? And I know we're making kind of a transition in the region, and that comes with the transition, right? Of just building up our union workforce with regard to the trades. Totally get it. But the expectation and standard will not and should not be lowered, right? So just want to put that out there, that we'll continue to work together and do whatever it is that we need to meet that 40% on every job. That should be the expectation, right? We may not get there for every job, but we certainly want to shoot for that for every job. So thank you for the presentation. It's very thorough. I don't know if you have any feedback for that, but I just wanted to be consistent with what I said during executive
Of course,
committee.
I will say we were disappointed too with how the prime contractor handled this. We had a pre-job, we were very specific, and then they just kind of didn't respond to anything. And they now are in the process of having to pay fines for how they handled this project that they now owe to the San Diego Union. So I'm hoping they kind of learned a lesson too of like, you can't use emergency work as a crutch, which we kind of told them. And I think that was something that TSG learned too, of like the emphasis, and MTS staff, of like, across the board, you cannot say, okay, it's emergency work, we don't have to follow the PLA. That's just not how it's going to work. So we've been trying to use maybe a different word to where there's an urgency to it. But in this case, they definitely said, well, emergency work, we're just going to get it done and be through with it. So I think that's a conversation we're having now with like current contractors of, yes, there's an urgency to it. Yes, it's going to be done within X amount of days. That being said, we still have time to go through these steps. You've agreed upon these requirements. You need to make sure that you fulfill them. So absolutely agree with you on that. We weren't happy with the numbers either. And we knew they could have done better because they said they would. So completely agree with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Steppe. Member Foster.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Being the new kid here today, my first meeting, I just have a couple of questions. I think one, you mentioned that this was emergency work, and I thought you indicated that this was from a predetermined list or as needed type contract. Is that how you guys run your emergency contracts, or is it a full solicitation?
No, this was an emergency contract, so we did not do a competitive bid because of the really quick turnaround due to the emergency work. And so staff identified a qualified contractor who was able to meet the dates and time frame to complete the work, and that was this contractor DRS.
So is it from, so am I to understand it's from a pre-qualification list?
No, this one was not from a pre-qualification list.
So how did they identify the qualified contractors?
I don't have that information. I don't know.
Good morning, Heather Fury, Director of Capital Projects. For this particular situation, DRS is on, has an active contract with MTS as a job order contractor. And so that is a 3-year contract with 2 one-year extensions that we use for smaller projects. And because they are very familiar with our system, this was reconstructing the grade crossing at Euclid. They do some grade crossing work for us. So we went directly to them as part of this effort.
Okay, so it's a job order contract that allows task orders to be applied to the contract.
That is the type of contract they have with us actively. However, for the emergency, we executed a standalone agreement with them, so it wasn't
Okay.
part of that
That
job
task.
order contract.
Okay. Is that normally how you run your emergency type contracts?
2024 has been an amazing year for emergency work. So we've done a few different things. I would say we typically try not to use the job order contracts for emergency work because those contracts have a capacity limitation on them, and we don't want to use that up. So the most recent effort we did was more of a competitive procurement with some pre-qualified firms for another project. But I'm definitely getting out of my area of expertise now.
I can jump in a little bit. I mean, we certainly have a lot of lessons learned on like what do we need to put in place to like be ready to respond to emergencies. But we had this year the January 22nd flood, which caused damage throughout our system. So there were various different job sites that we had to go in, secure immediately for public safety, then temporarily shore up so we could continue transit operations, then come back in and do a more permanent fix because the temporary fix wasn't going to hold for operations or safety for long. And so we did a series of who from past experience we know is qualified and is available to mobilize today, process of identifying contractors. And then we've had a couple of actually City of San Diego projects where they were doing underground work that caused sinkholes under our tracks. So we have 2 locations there right now that we are trying to manage the response. And again, the first is always, what do we need from a public safety standpoint? Are we allowed to operate on it? What needs to be done to kind of preserve immediate safety? What's the temporary solution? What's the permanent solution? But there've been hiccups all along of, first thing is get that work done, but we also need to make sure we're legally following all legal steps to do that. So we're putting together just an internal staff, like FAQ, how do we go out and do that work in the most expeditious way possible, but then also make sure that the contractor is complying with all the legal requirements on the back end, because that's an area where everyone is like mobilized, let's go do the work, but then at the back end, trying to make sure that they've complied with PLA and other things like that. So, it's there. We in the past, it was actually fairly rare for us to have emergencies. And so we didn't have like an emergency panel that's just there and already procured.
Understood. Thank you for that. I think it would probably be good, Sharon, and I'll ask this of you, if I can fall back and get a briefing on procurement delivery methods and what tools you currently have in your toolbox. I think that would be helpful for me to better understand. My last question is, in regards to monitoring, what system do you use? You guys use electronic certified payroll monitoring and so forth?
We do, yes.
What system?
It depends on what the contractor wants to use. There's different, you can do LCP tracker, they can do relations, e-comply. So we work with the contractor directly to see what they're comfortable with. If not, we have an in-house system that we also use.
Okay. All righty. The in-house system, was it configured to capture all the necessary requirements of the PLA?
Yes.
Okay, so it's in addition to the standard
Oh,
prevailing
absolutely,
wage
yes.
requirement.
So the report
Okay.
that we send them, MTS gets every month. It's going to show every month the hours that we have and then break it down with journeyman apprentices, local hire, non-local hire, targeted workers. So it's very thorough, and we can change that depending on what the PLA requires.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. That concludes my comments.
Right. Thank you, Member Foster. Member Bush.
I just want to thank the staff for their work on this, and Katie and the Solis Group, thank you for all of the details in the report. We saw this at the executive committee last week, but just wanted to echo the comments from Member Montgomery Steppe, the importance of the local hire. It's emergency, so things happen, but if we can use this to start and then really look at what we can do to be proactive on that and just make sure that that local hire is an important piece in hitting those goals. And appreciate the questions and the detail for Member Foster. So I'd definitely like to learn more about that too. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Bush. Seeing no further discussion on this informational item, we will move ahead to item number 23, and that is the yield to bus public hearing and implementation. We're going to invite Brent Boyd to present this item. Please feel free to comment up and get situated, and once you're ready to begin your presentation, feel free to start.
Good morning, Board. Brent Boyd, Director of Planning and Scheduling, and we're here to do a public hearing about placing signage on our buses to encourage drivers to yield to the buses to pull out when they're pulling out of the bus stop. A major source of delays for buses is re-entering the traffic stream after dropping off passengers or picking up passengers. They're basically reliant on a gap in traffic or courteous drivers allowing the buses to pull back in traffic. So getting the bus back in traffic is both a safety issue and a quality of service issue. Some jurisdictions mandate that drivers yield to a bus re-entering traffic, but that is not the case in the current California Vehicle Code. Oregon and Florida do that, but not many other places. Assembly Bill 1904 was passed earlier this year. It's co-sponsored by the California Transit Association and MTS, and it allows for yield to bus signage to be displayed on the back of transit buses in California. Previously, 2 agencies were allowed to do that, Santa Cruz Metro and VTA up in San Jose. This expands it to in the entire state of California. It was signed by the governor in September 2024. So California Vehicle Code Section 24617 will now permit signage on the buses, but there's no compliance requirements for drivers. It's just a courtesy message, essentially. No legal responsibility to allow the buses back in service. So the specific requirements to add signage to the back of the buses is that it can either be a static decal, a sticker essentially, or flashing LED lights. We are proposing at this time to put static decals on the back of the bus. We estimate a cost of about $5,000 to equip our 800 buses. Eventually, if it's successful, we may look at applying LED lights to the back of the buses, but that's a much more costly and time-consuming endeavor. So at this point, we're proposing the stickers. As part of the requirement, the board of the transit agency has to hold a public hearing, which we're doing right now, and then also approve a resolution requesting that this section of the vehicle code be applicable to MTS. And then finally, if that's approved, before we implement the program, we'll undertake a public education program to encourage motorists to yield to buses re-entering traffic. So the staff recommendation is to receive testimony, review, and comment on the implementation of California Vehicle Code Section 24617 for MTS's bus fleet at a public hearing, which we're doing right now, and then enact resolution number 24-18 to make the California Vehicle Code section applicable to MTS and implement all of the required actions of the code. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right, we'll begin our board discussion with Member Hall.
So there are no points. If no, it's just I guess my question is, it's just for a sticker then, there's no enforcement?
Correct. So right now, the law is just simply that we're able to put the sticker on the buses to encourage drivers to allow us into the traffic stream, but there's no law enforcement.
And if they don't, too bad.
Right. There have been studies in other agencies that have implemented a program that there has been some success in drivers allowing buses back into traffic, but it's all anecdotal.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Member Hall. We have a motion from Member Hall to approve the staff recommendation, and we have a second from Member McCann. Is there any further discussion on the item? Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablet. The motion passes with 14 members voting yes and 1 vacancy.
Thank you, clerk. That brings us to our chair, board member, and CEO communications. And I would like to highlight that we are coming up on the end of the year. And once again, this year, we're going to offer New Year's Eve free rides after 6 p.m. New Year's Eve, believe it or not, is just 12 days away. People are making plans to celebrate the arrival of 2025, and we want to help people ring in the new year safely. So MTS and NCTD are offering free rides after 6 p.m. on December 31st. That includes MTS buses, the trolley, the coaster, the sprinter, and the Breeze fixed route buses. Both of our agencies are also going to extend late night service on the MTS trolley as well as the NCTD coaster and sprinter to ensure safe and accessible transportation for all after people are done having fun for the evening. MTS is going to be offering 18 extra trolley trips out of downtown San Diego after midnight. Final trips are going to depart after 2 in the morning. And you can find a detailed service schedule on our website. That is sdmts.com/New Year's Eve. Whether it's taking public transit or using a ride-sharing service or finding a designated driver, we want San Diegans to get home safely. And offering free rides on transit is a great way to help people do that. I'm pleased that both of our agencies are going to be protecting public safety again in that way. All right, let's go to further communications, and we'll go to Director Downey.
Yes, I didn't get the chance in the beginning when you graciously welcomed me to introduce my alternate City Councilman Mark Fleming from Coronado. When I'm not here, he'll be here in our place. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you and welcome. It'll be great to have you here as well. Any other communications? Seeing no further communications, we do have 2 closed session items. Both are a conference with labor negotiators. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the closed session agenda?
We do. Nate Fairman, please make your way to the podium.
Thank you. You change it. Hi, good morning, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Nate Fairman from IBW Local 465, proudly representing 3,200 utility workers here in San Diego, including hundreds of employees right here at MTS. I have 2 quick items before you go into closed session. First, I want to say thank you to the board, Sharon, Jeff, and the staff here who sent me messages and prayers while I was off this year dealing with a family emergency. Your support helped my family through a very difficult time. For that, I want to say thank you to every single person in this room. My daughter Charlotte is home now after 6 months at Rady's NICU. She's happy, healthy, 8-month-old baby girl, and just want to say thank you for all your thoughts and prayers. Now, second, down to business. My frenemy, Jeff Stumbo, will present to you all in closed session our contract that was approved by our members. Our 200 mechanics had their pension benefits taken away from them in 2012 following the Measure B debacle. They no longer have pensions. All the new hires have a defined contribution plan, a 401k style plan. In these negotiations, our management partners finally agreed to bring back the pension, and this is after decades of IBW advocacy. There was a finance committee and actuarial report which found this to be feasible. Then it fell apart. First, it was budget deficits, then it was impacts on other labor agreements. But instead, we agreed to have a 2% increase to that defined contribution plan. But we did fall short of our goal to bring back the pension for our hardworking mechanics. So my promise to everyone in this room and all the MTS management partners is that when we sit down in 3 years from now, I don't know if anyone's going to be here in 3 years, maybe some mayors and Board of Supervisors that didn't come back. But whoever's here in 3 years, that's going to be our focus. That's going to be our demand in 2026 or 7 is going to be to bring back the pension. Let's study it. Let's continue to look at it. I think it's fair. I think it's reasonable. I do want to say thank you to Councilmember Vivian Moreno, Councilmember Bush, and Sean Elo Rivera, who continue to bring this issue up and keep this alive.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Fairman, is there any further public comment?
That concludes public comment.
Okay, all right. Mr. Fairman, thank you for your advocacy. Great to have you back, and I'm glad to hear that your family is doing well. With that, we will now move into closed session.
Reporting out of closed session. The agenda item number 27, closed session conference with labor negotiators related to 3 employee organizations. The first being Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1309, the second being International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 465, and the third being International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers. The board ratified the tentative agreements with each of these organizations by a vote of 12 members in favor and 3 members absent. The members in favor were Member Bush, Dillard, Elo Rivera, Mendoza, Foster, Goebel, Fernandez, Hall, McCann, Montgomery Steppe, Moreno, and Whitburn. And the members absent were Downey, Laban Gonzalez, and the vacant City of Poway membership. On agenda item number 28, closed session conference with labor negotiators related to the Transit Enforcement Officers Association, the board received a report and gave negotiating instructions to staff. And that concludes my report.
This meeting is now adjourned.